Alright, today I'm going to show you how to build some bookshelves. So we just moved into this new house and there wasn't a lot of shelving. And instead of buying shelving, I decided to make some. This one is CD grade 3/4 inch plywood, and we painted it. And these are 3/4 inch plywood, but they're the $50 a sheet version because they're oak finished. And so you put a little bit of stain on there. They look real nice. And I've been posting pictures of these on Facebook, and people are like, you ought to make a video on how you make those. So that's what we're going to do. So I have this space here by my bed, and I was thinking I'd put a short shelf over there. The way you make a longer shelf or a shorter shelf is exactly the same. So we're going to make one that's about 20 inches wide to fit there in that space. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is I got some 8-foot long plywood boards I've cut into 12-inch strips, and these are 8 foot long. I need to get them down to 7 foot. The reason for that is I have 8-foot tall walls. If I have an 8-foot tall shelf, it's hard to stand up because the diagonal is longer than 8 feet, and it's just hard to get in there. So if you make them about 7 foot tall, that means you got a top shelf space of about 12 inches anyway, which is kind of nice to have a top shelf that's usable. So we're going to cut these down to 7 foot. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my saw up. And you notice I got the tape measure out here to where the 12-inch mark is just on the other side, this side of the blade. So when I cut the board, the 8-foot board, I'll be cutting off and leaving exactly 7 foot. Now, my guide over here says I'm an 1/8 of an inch inside that. Now there's a couple little adjustment screws there. I could adjust that, but I'm a lazy guy and I normally just measure, make sure that I'm either cutting to the right of the blade or left of the blade, either one. So I always just measure, make sure I'm getting the right amount. So I really use this over here to get me close, and then use the tape measure to get me exact. So I've never bothered adjusting that. Maybe I'll do that someday. Now, normally I'd have winch Lori hold up one end of the board so that I didn't have the chance of torquing down the blade there. But it works. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my base. And since I'm going to have these uprights on either side set on top of this, okay, like this, I need to account for the width of these plus the width of the rails, the shelf rails that I'm going to put on the inside. To determine how long my base needs to be. So I've got a couple of these old pieces of 3/4 inch plywood, so it's real easy to set those on the side because that's going to account for the width of my uprights. And then I'm just going to measure over. Remember, I wanted a 20-inch shelf, but I also have my shelf supports are an 1/8 of an inch each. So that means I need to add to the 20-inch mark. I need to add 2/8, which is 1/4. So I'm going to mark that, and then I can cut this, and we'll have the width of our base. And then I'll cut another one the same size for the width of the top, because again, the top will set down on top of the uprights. Alright, so my next step is to stain these two pieces of board so that they match my other boards here. So we got our wood stain out, and you notice this board here has a decent side, and then it has a messed up side. This edge right here is kind of messed up, and it actually extended over here a little ways, but I took some sandpaper and sanded that off a little bit. So I'll make this the side that you see, and I'll make sure that this is the front that you see, and I'll hide that at the back and that at the bottom. And then same thing on this one. This one has has a good side, and then it has a not so good side. You can see some sun weathering or something there. And then, so I will make sure that this is the top of the shelf. And so that way you can see the good side on the inside if you look up. So we'll just pay attention to which side is which when we put it together. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill some holes along the side here, which I'm going to use to screw this part into my risers. And we're using construction screws. I'm not using drywall screws. Drywall screws are kind of used for everything these days, but they don't have good tensile strength. If you've ever been screwing them in, you'll know you pop heads on them all the time because they're not that strong. So I'm trying these construction screws. These use a star head. Seems to work a little bit better than the Phillips head anyway. So, and they're a coarser thread, and they seem to go in pretty good and hold pretty good. They grab in this plywood well because I'm going in the end way, and they seem to grab pretty good. So that's what we're using. And I'm going to drill these pilot holes so that I can get these started, and it makes it easier to line everything up. When I got everything lined up, I can just hit this and screw it right in. Alright, now you want to make sure your holes are such that they're going to go through and go into the middle of the 3/4 inch plywood that's going to be on the back side of this. So one way you could do that is you could set this up on top to where it's even, and then take a pencil, scribe it across, and then that way, you know, drill between that line and the edge of the board and you'll be even. That, or else you could just kind of put that up there, get an idea for where it's at, and then drill your holes by eye. Depends on how much you do this. And I like to have about 4 holes. You could measure those if you wanted to make sure that they were all evenly spaced, but it doesn't really matter. Alright, so at this point we want to make sure we know which end we're going to put up or down, as the case may be. In other words, our top and our bottom, and make sure we've selected. Now remember, this one here has got some messed up stain on it, so this is going to be the bottom, and this is also got some messed up stain on the edge, so this is going to be the back side. So bottom, back. So that means I'm going to be putting in my screws from the bottom up into the upright. So we're just going to take some of our construction screws. I've just got these on a hand driver with the star bit, and I'm just going to get these started by hand again, so that way when I go to assemble this and I get everything lined up, all I got to do is take my drill driver, hit these, and they go right in. Makes things much faster. And you don't have to put them in very far for them to hold. And of course they don't stick out on the other side, so that's not going to affect you being able to line these up with your other boards. So I'll do that for the next 12 screws, and then we'll start assembling. Alright, so if you remember, these are 8-foot boards and we cut off the end. We cut a foot off, which means I've got this unstained end here, which I'm never going to see, so I'm not going to worry about staining it because I'm going to have one of these end pieces over here. The bottom is going to butt up against that like that, so I really don't have to worry about that. But one thing I am going to do is I'm going to attach these shelf brackets. I'm going to attach those now because otherwise, if I put this in place and then attach them, I have to bend down to get these here in the bottom and work my way up, and it's just a real, and plus I'm working, in this case, a 20-inch space. It's just kind of a pain, so I decided I'm going to mount these strips on here on the workbench, which is a nice working height for me, and it'll be much easier. Plus, these are a pain in the butt to mount anyway, because if you buy these little packets with the, especially if you get the ones with the white screws and brackets and stuff, they paint these stinking screws. You can see that one there. Doesn't even, you can't even see the Phillips head anymore. But they're kind of a pain. You can't see that one either. Even the ones that you can see, they get kind of clogged up and they're hard to work with. So working at good working height will be much more pleasurable, and I'll get those mounted here. Alright, so I didn't put a screw in every hole in these. The reason for that is I don't know if I have enough screws. I'm not going to really be putting anything heavy on these shelves. They're on a 20-inch shelf and it doesn't have to hold that much. So I'm going to save my screws to do the other side. And then if I still have screws left over, I'll come back and fill up the rest of the screw holes. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to lay out our pieces where we got our base there, and our side piece here, side piece there. And we've got one of these little clamp things here. If you don't have one of these, you can get a helper to help you hold this in place. But I'm going to do this one by myself, so I'm going to use this little thing here. So I'll show you what we're going to do. Alright, so I'm going to turn this end piece up on end. I'm going to take my base. Again, this is my messed up part here, or my blemish is going to be on the bottom. And there's a blemish on the top side, so it's going to be on the back of the piece. And I'm gonna roughly get these in place. I'm gonna put this little clamp thing on here. I'm gonna hold one of these in here to where this should be the right depth here, and I'm gonna tighten up this one. And then this one here, put the camera over here so you can see it a little bit better. So this one here, you can see this is low right here. So I'm going to raise it up to where it's level, and then tighten this clamp. Okay. Looks like this one here needs to go out just a little bit, so let me get this kind of snug. Alright, see how this is out? So I'm going to take this one, I'm going to loosen it, tighten it back up, and then this one here, raise it up in place, tighten it. Okay, so now that those are flush on both sides, this side and this side, I'm going to hit this with the drill driver and put this top screw in. And I leaned on it and messed it up here. But that's why we have a hammer. Slide this up just a little bit. give it a tap, put it back in place, run this in. Alright, so now with the top one in, it's just a matter of lining up the rest of the edge here and screwing those in. So we'll do that real quick. And this I can just do with the one hand. Get the bottom here even. Alright, so now we got these 4 screws in on the bottom, and we'll do the same thing over here on this side. So again, take our clamp, put this on, line it up, clamp it down, and then run the screw in. Take the clamp off, and then we'll just go ahead and run the rest of the screws in down here. And there we go. Alright, so now that we have the base in, we're going to come up here, we're going to do the exact same thing, put the top on. Alright, so now that we got the box, I need to cut shelves, put those in there, and before I do that, I'm going to put a backing on this. I'm going to measure the width, put a backing on it, that way it'll keep the sides from bowing out over the years. Adds a little bit nicer touch to it, the way it looks, and plus I can run a screw through the backing into the stud on the wall, make sure it doesn't tip over. So we'll get some backing cut. Alright, so I'm going to measure the width here with my sides and everything on it, and I'm right at 22 inches. Measured the other end, it's 22 also, so that's good. It's always nice when that works out that way. And so this is 7 foot tall plus, but I've got this piece here which is just a little shorter than 6 foot. But I think that's going to be plenty big enough, but I'm going to leave the gap at the bottom because I got some things that I'm going to run some cords to the electrical outlet. So having a little bit of gap at the bottom will work out just fine for me. So I'm going to set up the table saw over there with for 22 inches, and then just run this piece through that, and then I'll have my backing ready to put on there. Okay, the good news is, since the last thing I ran through was my top and my bottom pieces that were 22 inches, my table saw is already set up for 22 inches, so all I gotta do is start it up and run that piece through. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Alright, so this is my top. So I'm going to line this up even with the edges and across the top. I'm going to line the top up first because I know if this is square with the top and then I make this square with this, the whole thing's square, because otherwise this can be kind of diamond shaped and a little cattywampus. So I'll line the top up, straight edge up first, and then line my sides up, and that way I'll know the whole thing is square. First things first though, gotta retrieve the screws. Alright, we got the top lined up. Alright, so it looks like my shelf is just a little narrower in the middle than it should be. Because the board's probably one of these, I think this board here is maybe bowed in a little bit. So we're going to work, this edge here feels pretty straight. So I'm going to work down this edge, and then I'll get winch Lori out here to help me pull this board out a little bit when I go to put this in. Now, one other thing I'll mention is you'll notice I didn't drill pilot holes. This is kind of a particle board backing, and these construction screws have a self drilling. There you go, you should be able to see it there. So these construction screws are made to kind of be self-tapping, but since I'm going to be trying to line this up as I go, I'm going to go ahead and drill some pilot screws in this backing material. That'll help things. Alright, let's get some screws in this one side. Alright, I'm going to make sure this is nice and square. If it's not, I'm going to pull on the box a little bit until it gets nice and square. Because again, this piece is square. This piece could be all kinds of different ways. But I think that looks pretty good there. So I know I'm square up there at that end. I'm going to put a screw in here square at this end, and if I have to push or pull this a little bit to get it lined up perfectly because there's a little bow in this board, then that's what I'll do. So that down there end is perfectly flush. This end here is perfectly flush. This end here bows out just a little bit. So I'm going to push that in, and when I do that, everything else is flush. So we're going to put this screw in next. And then now all you gotta do is put the rest of these in. Alright, time to go get help for that other side, because I said it's bowed and I'm going to have to get somebody to hold it so I can adjust it, because I'm not going to be able to adjust it just by pushing in with my finger. It's bowed too much. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the screw in on this end, because this end's even and the rest of it's bowed. So we're going to get winch Lori out here to help me pull this out so I can get a couple screws in it and to put the rest of them in. Alright, this is bowed out, or bowed in, so I'm going to have to pull it out until this is even. And I think, based on the amount it's bowed, it's going to be better for me to pull it and you to screw it in. So why don't we start with this one here. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Okay, let me. Okay, right there. Okay, let's do this one here. Hang on. Okay. Alright. Okay, that was enough to straighten it out. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alright, so this is now essentially done. We got the bracket, the bracket rails on here for the shelving. We got a back on it so we can again find the stud, screw a couple screws through to keep it from falling over. And now all you got to do is cut some 22-inch shelves and slide those in. So we're good to go. Alright, so the next thing we got to do is we got to figure out where our studs are on the wall. So Lori's got her handy dandy stud finder over there. I really hate the thing because I'm not so sure it works that well. I need to invest in a better one. But at any rate, we'll find where the stud is, measure how far over from the wall it is, and then that will tell us, nope, go to the right because the shelf isn't that wide. And then hopefully we'll be able to, I'm going to save you the hassle of watching us trying to figure out where the stud is with this stupid thing, because it just, it as Bart Simpson would say, it both blows and sucks. So at any rate, we'll try to get that figured out, and then once we do, we'll measure over, and then that'll tell us where to put in some screws to hold the shelf against the wall. Alright, so now what we got to do is put it in place here. Alright, so as you can see there, we got electrical outlets there, and our opening is just above those electrical outlets, so I think it's going to work out well. Alright, so our stud finder said that 7 inches over from this wall we should have a stud. So just to keep this from falling this way, we're going to go ahead and put a couple screws in through our backing that we added into the stud to hold it in place. Won't take much. Again, there's not going to be too much heavy stuff on here. Just my CPAP machine. Imagine a overweight older drinker needing a CPAP. So again, 7 inches over. Then we've got 1 inch and a quarter or so that we've lost over here. So that means we need to go 3/4 of an inch plus 5. So 5 3/4 should be right there. There should be a stud. We'll find out. Alright, that grabbed and held, so indeed there's a stud there. If not, it just would have gone into drywall and it just would have spun, and we would have been able to tell that real easy. Does that look lined up back there?
I don't know, there's a big body, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Hang on. Yeah.
Let's see if I get lucky. Yep.
Yeah,
stud there. Alright, I think 3 would be enough for this application. Again, keep it from falling over. So all we got to do is put our shelves in there and we're good to go. Alright, so I went and measured on the inside. Came out with, verified that my 20-inch shelf was still okay. So I got a 20-inch board here. I'm just gonna check it before I cut more of these. And fits in there okay. Kind of catching on these screws a little bit, but the 20-inch board will work all the way down, so I just cut as many of these as I want shelves. Alright, so we got some shelves cut. We got our alarm clock on there. We got our CPAP, our melatonin, and our iPhone, and all kinds of stuff. I'll put a couple more shelves in there tomorrow when it's not so late, but I think that should give you an idea of how to build one of those if you want one. And yeah, I think it'll work out well for me. It gets stuff over there against the wall. It's only taking up pillow space, so it's not in the walkway or anything, so it'll work out well.